Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on a beautiful Friday night. This is a real treat for us. I have had so much fun for the last half hour getting to talk to our composer who's here, and we'll be featuring his world premiere, Colors of Peace. Would you please help me welcome Mr. Bruce Stark and the soloist, Dr. Shu Lee. Yeah, come sit. So I don't get a chance to do this very much of getting to host a conversation with a composer at a world premiere with the soloist. So our plan, just to give you an overview, is to talk to Bruce and get to know Bruce and his background, to hear about this piece, and just to talk about what are the elements that connect us, what should we listen for as an audience. And then there are some questions that came from Dr. Lee's theory classes, and we'll integrate some of that in there. So Bruce, thanks for joining us. Glad you're here.
Pleasure to be here, thanks.
So talk to us about just your upbringing, where you're from, where you started with music, and your pathway to today.
Hello, everybody. The first thing I want to do, actually, before anything else, if you don't mind, is I want to just say a big thank you to Dr. Lee for commissioning this piece, and also for, well, to Dr. Folliard and also Augustana University for supporting the commission. It's great stuff. I'm really grateful for that. So thank you for, I wouldn't be here and the piece wouldn't exist without that. So that's just
great. So we were just talking backstage. You started off as a drummer?
Yeah, my first formal training was actually snare drum in like fourth grade, I think it was. I sort of migrated on to piano after that. But lucky me, there was an old upright piano in the house, so I was always messing around on it. The truth is, until college, other than my snare drum training, I was pretty much self-taught, actually. Just finding my way around it, and I just found myself making things, arranging things, composing things, even before I knew anything about the notation. So I just sort of came to music from a pretty intuitive, and am I still on? That goes off and on.
We have a battery issue up there? Is that what's going on? Should we switch?
Could just be, maybe I'm...
Shoot, can we switch microphones maybe? Would that be okay? I don't think it's on you. The battery's low, all right.
Hello, hello. I'll try not to move.
You're on.
Okay, I'll give this to you. You need to talk. Anyway, so yeah, started with snare drum, sort of self-taught, and fell in love with jazz in high school, and then in college. Truth is, I was a science major, physics major for the first 3 years of college. I wanted to do music then, but in my case, my father was totally, you want to do music, you're not going to get a penny from me. It was one of those situations. So it took me 3 years to get up the commitment to just decide I'm going to do music anyway. So I left home and just basically put myself through college after that, starting from the beginning as a music major.
And where was this?
I'm sorry. I was born in San Diego area, Southern California. And so starting from zero, got my undergraduate at Cal State Northridge in the Los Angeles area. They had a really, really good composition program. And so I'm already fast forward. Basically, when I got to college, I encountered the music of J.S. Bach, and I just fell in love with it. And I just knew really quickly that what I want to be is a composer for the concert stage, even though jazz is my secondary musical love and passion. And so
Bach and jazz go very well together, though.
Yeah,
they big do. Time. Yeah. So then, is it directly from Northridge over to Juilliard? Is that right? Okay. So tell us about. I mean, you studied with some icons at Juilliard.
Yeah, Vincent Persichetti and Roger Sessions. Just shortly before they passed away, I was pretty lucky. I got to have my time with them. But yeah, and by then I was just firmly into this idea of wanting to be a composer for the concert stage. But I never stopped practicing and studying and doing jazz piano, because I've always loved improvisation. Maybe because of how I became to music, just messing around with the instrument with no supervision. Probably that is where that comes from, this idea of just enjoying improvisation as part of things. So yes, I went to New York, did my master's in composition there, and after a few years after that, I was asked by an independent label in Tokyo to do some piano improvisation recordings, and I visited Tokyo several times. I loved it, and I had been 7 years in New York, and so I just thought, hey, I'm gonna go live in Japan for 3 years, learn the language, because when I went there, I just immediately, I kind of fell in love with the country in many ways. So I lived in Japan for, get this, more than 20 years.
Wow.
It was a big chunk of my life. Came back 10 years ago, and now I'm teaching at a place called DigiPen Institute of Technology near Seattle. It's actually a video game school that has a music and sound design program, part of which is a traditional arm, and so I teach the kind of stuff you get here, theory, composition, these kind of things. So there's
That's,
the
yeah, there's
background.
that's great. So curious about how your time in Japan both informed but also contradicted your Western education and experience, and then how that influences you now, both as a person and a composer.
Yeah. In my case, I wasn't in any academic way passionate about learning the more traditional aspects of Japanese music. I just sort of went there because I liked the place, rather kind of pure-hearted, and I went there. And while there, though, something did happen that I can talk about as an American composer. In my case, living there for so long, and I learned the language, and I really wanted to be there and take advantage of the opportunity of living in a foreign country. If you ever live in a foreign country, study the language. That's all I can tell you. Just do it. It opens the doors to really understanding what's going on, much more than writings by other foreigners about that country. So you want to dig in and learn the language. Anyway, for me, it did have an effect on me in that I think the distance from America, it made me cherish more certain parts of America and my background in the jazz aspect, but also even like the kind of Aaron Copland appellations, or even all these things. And all I know is I ended up wanting to write pieces that were more nostalgic of those things that were American. Like I wrote a big piece called American Sweet, or these kind of things. So in my case, I think it strengthened my wanting to cherish certain things about America, as opposed to now you're hearing traditional Japanese music in this person's music. And I think part of that also is that when you go to Japan, at least my experience, the Japanese people, they wanted to know what I bring. They didn't want me to become Japanese, even though I worked very hard to be able to speak it somewhat fluently. They were like, what do you got? Bring some America to us. And so it kind of made me conscious of being an American more than I'd ever been before. So
I'm just curious, when you bring up some of those, I don't mean this in a pejorative sense, populist composers like Copland, and then studying with somebody like Persichetti and Roger Sessions, was there, where were Persichetti and Sessions in their mind, despite being so forward-thinking in 20th century harmony, and then at the same time you've got, I'm just fascinated, I don't get to talk to somebody who studied with Persichetti often, or ever, so where were they in their relationship with somebody like Copland, and then when you are looking to kind of come up with your own vocabulary and looking back at your homeland? I'm just curious how that all collided.
Yeah, it's funny because we didn't really talk style in that way, but I could just summarize briefly their way of teaching. With Persichetti, he was just incredibly charismatic. He was an incredible improviser, first of all, and he also had an encyclopedic knowledge of music, just like boggled my
An
mind.
organist, right? Is that right? He was an organist predominant? Was that where he started?
I think so, but
Yeah.
keyboard, he was very,
Okay,
he
yeah.
just had a piano. But anyway, what he would do is he would look at, in those days we didn't have all the wonderful Sibelius software, we just had, the pencil scratch on the page. He would read through whatever I'm writing, and then he would just bombard me with possibilities that it could go, this piece. So he had such a fertile music imagination. He would just literally throw all this stuff at me about what it could do. And so I'd walk out just sort of dizzy and had to sort it out afterwards, what I agreed and didn't agree with, which in composition, that's how it is. You don't want to agree with your teacher all the time because you want to develop your own voice. Sessions, on the other hand, was all about form and clarity. Even though his language is very different than mine, he never gave me anything about that. He would just want to know, so what's the most important idea here, Stark? What is going on here? What is the overall design? He was all about clarity of design, and so I learned a lot from him as well.
That's
Although
really...
I agreed with about half of what he said.
It's really neat to hear about. Thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about now your life as a composer and some of the different works that you've written, some of your favorite works, where you find yourself inspired currently, and what's going on in your professional life there and as a composer.
Tough questions. So I don't have a favorite. By the way, I want to say that if any of you or any of the people who wrote the list of questions, they were a great list of questions. Really interesting, probing questions. This is a hard one. I don't have any particularly favorite works. I tend to write instrumental music mostly, and I favor strings and piano, but you never know. I've had more commissions and more performances from my work for low brass and piano than anything, even though it's not what I necessarily identify with. You never know where things are going to go out. So I tend to write chamber music mostly, and a lot of solo piano. Do you want me to go to this thing about jazz as part of?
I'm curious about that influence,
Yeah.
that you've never gone away from that. That was something you fell in love with, and it's always been there. And
Yeah. The influence, I'll say this because there were some questions about that as well. So the way jazz plays out in my composing for the concert stage is actually nuanced and subtle. It's not like you'll hear like the piece that Dr. Lee is going to perform today. You're not going to think, oh yeah, it's jazz. It's not. But there is an influence of jazz in my chord voicings, in the aesthetic, the idea of suddenly lines coming out in kind of improvisational, on a toccata-like, you might say. So it's a subtle thing. It's about rhythms and harmonies and lines, but it's not that you're hearing jazz, but it's sort of in the backbone of things sometimes. So it's not an obvious thing. Whereas as a jazz player, you never know where your dollar is going to come from. I literally made a living as jazz pianist and arranger in Tokyo for many, many years because it was a skill that I could, I've always been composing and that it comes in from there, but my main income in Tokyo for 20 years was as a jazz player and composer. And as I just was talking to you before we started here, just last year, before I say this one, this is how jazz still serves me sometimes in terms of work. Anybody here check out the remake of Mario vs. Donkey Kong? Came out about a month ago. No gamers here. I see a nodding head. Okay. Anyway, because of someone who works in my circles who knew of my work, I did like all the music for the gameplay for that release. It just came out about a month ago from Nintendo. And that because they wanted a Latin jazz thing. And so it's just an evidence of how that jazz part of me still, it kind of comes and goes with an occasional commercial project. And it's just sort of part of me, but much more subtly in terms of my classical output.
So let's talk about Colors of Peace then, and how some of all of that is woven in here. And so as we prepare to hear a world premiere, some nuggets maybe for us to listen and follow along with. Is there anything that you can kind of give us as little trail of crumbs to follow?
Yeah, okay, just to kind of explain what this piece is about. So when Dr. Lee approached me, she basically just said, I'd like a piece of piano music, a little over 20 minutes would be great, and something on the theme of peace. That's what I got. And to her credit, she just left it at that. Like, do what you want with it, that's all I want, just something about peace. And so I just had to chew on that, and I didn't want to write a 22-minute peaceful piece of music. There's a lot of wonderful meditative music or adagio compilations. You can find beautiful, peaceful music that goes on forever. Go on YouTube, right? I wanted to write a piece of music that I can, fill with the different kinds of music that I love to write, namely sometimes vibrant, sometimes aggressive, sometimes lyrical. So I came up with this idea of colors of peace, meaning the different aspects of peace that I think a lot of people experience in their lives. So I guess a real fast summary, there's 6 movements. They're all pretty short, but first movement is called Shades of Prayer, which I think kind of speaks for itself, doesn't need much explanation. Second movement is it's called Blossom. And with that movement, it's a little more vibrant. I wanted to express the way that society flourishes vibrantly when we are under an umbrella of peace. So that was how I kind of was able to conceive of that one. Third movement is called Meditation, which also I think speaks for itself. The idea of peace being on a personal level, not a societal level. We need to cultivate peace in our hearts and souls to be effective in the world. And so this inner peace is what the theme of that's about. The fourth movement is called Warrior's Hue, as in warrior's color. And that is inspired by this, it's basically dedicated to the people who, as I see it, literally help maintain and defend our peace. In modern societal terms, it's the military or it's the Ukrainian soldier on the line right now. And people fight and risk everything to help defend and protect our peace. And so I just felt like, wow, that's a great way to bring in some more aggressive music. At the same time, a bit of a tribute to the people who sacrificed so much. So that's what that movement's about. The fifth movement is called Refrain. It's just a look back at the themes that have been coming at you, which continue to kind of grow and develop. There's a lot of themes that keep reappearing throughout all the movements. So it's a refrain, it's a lyrical piece. And then it finishes with what's called a Rhapsody, and that piece is full-bodied and full of notes, as Dr. Lee knows well. And the idea of that was just a passionate expression of our commitment to strive for peace. Because personally, I don't think total world peace is maybe ever going to be possible with the human race. I feel like it's just a constant striving, and hopefully we can have society which is better equipped to protect itself from those who would take peace away from us. But that striving is what I think is really critical for humankind too. And so that last one is really a passionate expression of that commitment to strive for peace, which I think is maybe the best we can do. This is my own worldview. So there it is, Colors of Peace.
That's exciting. So I want to hear from Dr. Lee a little bit about your, as a performer, as an artist, uncovering and discovering what Bruce has written. And yeah, if you would.
Maybe this is better? Yeah, I think that's better. I think this one a little bit more. Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you for Bruce composed this phenomenal piece. Once I start playing this piece, I fall in love with this piece. Every second I play with it. I'm sure you guys will love the piece. Because when I play the music, I feel like the music is not only touching the heart, it's touching the soul. I'm sure you guys can feel the same thing. You can feel the music flows, and you kind of connect with the soul. We connect with what the composer is thinking. So it has been a fantastic experience for me to play this piece. And I'm sure you guys will in love with this piece too.
Oh, great. Well, I would say, without further ado, let's get on to Colors of Peace. So give us about 2-3 minutes. Oh, student questions, I'm sorry. All right, here was my favorite question, and we got into a little bit. The students wrote really wonderful questions. There was one about, for Bruce, that said, what is your least favorite instrument, and how do you compose for that instrument? And I thought that would be an interesting one for us to start with. So would you mind exploring that with us?
That's a funny question. In the Western classical palette, I don't have a least favorite instrument. I love the Western classical palette, the orchestral palette, and as well, and piano as well. So there's all these other instruments from other cultures that I don't know a whole lot about. So there, I don't tend to write for them. I appreciate them. So I don't really have an instrument among the standard orchestral wind, strings, brass palette that is my least favorite. And that's why that would be my answer, is I love them all. Maybe that's the composer's thing, I really do. That said, of course, some commissions are just far more close to my heart than others, like things involving the winds and strings, and now even brass, but I've had so many things for brass that right now I'm kind of taking a break from that. It's like, I need to refresh here. But no least favorite instrument would be my answer.
Okay. Go ahead, Shu.
Yeah, I think the student also prepared some questions. Should we handle the microphone?
I am going off of exactly what they sent me. I went through and I read all your questions. That's so I'm reciting them as we go, and there were some real similarities. So,
anyone want to ask?
Yeah, this is by all means.
Yeah. Do you need a microphone? You guys can come together. Owen,
I'll give you this one. Yeah.
Yeah. This one's.
You're on the spot, Owen.
You guys are ready?
Test.
Yeah, this one's on. Yeah, this one. All right. So anyone want to ask a question? I know the AI one is the one really interesting.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So as a composer, how do you feel about AI-generated music? Do you see it as like a threat, or are you okay with it, or?
That was on the list, and that was the hardest question. Honestly, I just saw that and went, I don't know how to answer that. My feeling is that, we can't stop this. It's going to keep growing and getting better and more effective, and in a way, it'll create new jobs. This sounds kind of almost trivializing. But it'll create new positions where people are there to direct and work AI to make cool things. So I'm not against it, and I have a feeling that in my life it probably won't have as strong an influence as many other industries or any other kinds of people. So I don't have a stance other than that it's inevitable, and we need to just, embrace it, draw laws that help protect creators in the right way. But other than those concerns, I'm afraid I don't have a whole lot to give you on that one. But it's a really deep and relevant question, because here it comes.
I'm gonna talk a little bit loudly, but one of the things that Google just came out today with Udio, U-D-I-O, and then there's another website called Suno.com, and you can go in and just text prompt music, and lyrics and instrumental will all come. Today I messed around with this. Write a violin sonata in the style of Mozart, and off it goes. And it's good enough, not great, good enough. But what was fascinating is the time that we live in is what many are calling post-genre, that nothing is specifically one thing. This is classical music, this is jazz, that it's all fusion. And the idea, the freedom that you can type in electro, hip hop, dub, orchestral. Like that, what is that genre? Or add bluegrass to that too. What is that? And AI will take all of that and give you something. And if that just spurs some creativity, and we use it as a thought partner. I find it fascinating, and I'm really excited to see what composers do with that, rather than take that as an end result. I think that's our danger.
A tool.
Yes,
a tool
that's
for
it.
us.
Yeah. It's a Swiss Army knife. So, sorry, not for me, not my question.
Any other questions? Jack? Oh.
Okay. So my question was about the music that you listen to. How is the music you listen to and what you enjoy listening to and the place that you lived impacted the way that you both listen to and compose music?
Oh, listening is a funny one because, when I'm composing a piece, I don't want to do a whole lot of listening. I've got the antenna up and I just kind of want to make my space. So listening goes in waves. I'll have times when I'm really on YouTube just checking out a bunch of different stuff. And it tends to be contemporary classical or some of my favorite jazz. But it can also be, I love Bach. And I love Chopin. I love all these big, iconic, amazing composers. They're amazing. My analogy for some of these great composers, it's like looking into the sun. They're so brilliant. They're so great that I can only take it for certain doses as a composer because we need to preserve ourselves. And there's just the greatness of some of these, big name titans. It's phenomenal. The more I learn and grow as a composer, the more I appreciate them. Anyway, so yeah, short answer is I go through long phases of not listening very much because I want to listen to my music inside of my head and develop something new and come out with something. And so I kind of don't want it to interrupt me. Yeah. Maybe
Thank
I'm
you.
a little weird about that one, but I know other composers who are just constantly listening, so we're all different. Yeah.
Okay, you were a percussionist before you did piano, so what obstacles did you face when you were trying to transition from percussion to piano?
Well, actually, it all just kind of happened simultaneously because I was always messing around with the piano, and then I started my snare drum thing, and I wouldn't call myself a percussionist, I studied this stuff for a while, and then I was playing some drums. So yeah, to me, it was all just sort of a flow, and then my emphasis just sort of shifted because I wanted to compose. And for that, the piano is the ultimate tool. You got everything's laid out there. So I think it was sort of a natural gravitation because of the utility of the piano. Yeah.
So how do you deal with things such as writer's block as a composer?
I didn't quite understand what you just said.
How do you deal with things such as writer's block as a composer?
Oh, yes, that was also on the list. It's a question I actually have to say I wanted to answer. I saw that, I want to answer that question. So how do you deal with writer's block? The way I deal with it is that I do not acknowledge the existence of that term. I will never say that word. I can say it in this conversation, but I don't. It's kind of like we do not say his name. It's like I just don't. I feel like in acknowledging it as a thing that you're sort of amplifying it. It's just my way of looking at things. What you put your attention on, it just kind of makes it more. And so I have times when I'm not productive, it's not happening. I have false starts. I keep trying and something's not happening. But I just tell myself, hey, I've been here before. It's not happening. I'm going to keep at it. It's going to come. Or maybe I take a break and eventually it's going to happen. I like Mark Twain's quote. He said about creativity, the harder I work, the luckier I get. Meaning that if you just keep going, you're going to open yourself up to more probability that special inspiration comes to you or something like that. But it's a great question, and I really mean it. I don't ascribe to that concept. It's like it's not something I can have in my brain because I don't think it's productive to think it. I've got writer's block. All of a sudden, it's like you have it even more just because you said it. Is sort of how I look at that. But great question.
All right. What is your composition process?
These are hard questions. First of all, there's no template. Every piece kind of different, but I've been doing this a long time. I've been around a long time, composing for decade after decade. So I do see the patterns of behavior, and I can speak of that. I tend to start by just, I sit outside and smoke a cigar on my patio and just try to dream and think of where I'm going, what I want to do with it. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. Don't smoke. It's bad. I do like a good cigar, but that's my fault. Anyway, so I start just very general, just with my finger to the wind, trying to get something. And my process is it's like throwing a line in fishing. I always have a lot of ideas. It's just me, but they're not all good ideas. So ideas are something I've always had just in abundance. There's always something, improvising at the piano or something. But the trick is I'm trying to find a good one that's worthy of digging in and pulling out the Sibelius and making a proper score. So anyway, I start general. I often improvise at the piano to get some ideas, but it's not always that. Sometimes it's just taking walks, whatever it is, just trying to get something. I often have many false starts before I finally find the fish that's worth reeling in. And then it's like just kind of go, just keep at it. The Mark Twain thing. I know I'm finished with something when I can sleep at night about it, and when it's not irritating me. It sounds kind of funny, but I know something's not quite right because I just don't feel good about it. And although I'm so familiar with that feeling that I know it's just a matter of carrying on until I'm satisfied with it, and then I know I'm finished with that passage. So yeah, I start general, start with sketching. I usually start actually with the old pencil on the manuscript for some sketches, just simple stuff. And then when I know I've got the one that I feel is worthy of investing in, that's when I pull out the software and start making a proper score. Sometimes I get stuck, but I don't say writer's block, and I just either take a break or just keep on going. But I have no magic trick or anything. Just most of it's persistence. I guess that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. Hello.
Hi.
Are there any instruments that you have not learned yet or composed for that you want to learn?
Oh, what? I'm assuming you're talking about more the Western palette, the Western classical palette? Yeah. Oh, there's plenty of instruments I can't play. I mean, that said, first of all, piano and percussion are very familiar to me. When I was in high school, I played a little sax for a while, and strings is by far the one that seems to me to be the most needing of knowledge to write well for. There's just so much in the right hand and in the bow and in the different strings, and there's just so much there. So several times I've taken violin lessons just to practice for a few months, just to get a sense of the physicality. But a lot of the wind instruments, and it's weird that that's the music that right now is probably played the most, is my piece for trombone, horn, and piano. I don't play those instruments, but I've worked a lot with players. And ask them a lot, and even now, whenever I have any doubts, I just text my trombone colleague where I teach, and say, what about that high A flat? How long can you hold that? Just something specific, and he answers me right away. And I have found across the board that players like to share their wisdom with composers. They want you to write good music for them. But there's plenty of music, particularly in winds, that I don't play, and I don't play the strings, although I've played, I've taken lessons and did a year here and a year there just to have a little bit of the physical imagery. And strings is most of the orchestra, so once you get the basic sense of the strings, you've got a big chunk of stuff, right? So you don't have to be able to play it to write well for it, is how I feel. If you have friends and if you have experiences with the instrument and you study scores and such, you don't have to play everything, is how I see it. Maybe someone would disagree with me, but that's how I see it.
Okay, who's next?
Are we on schedule? I want to make sure. Yeah. We're good?
We've been about a half hour. Henry, you want to be the last one? Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
That gives me that allows me to choose. When it comes to work-life balance, how do you presumably having a fairly busy schedule with the many things that you do, how do you maintain a work-life balance in regards to priorities between your musical life and your personal life?
I'm not quite catching you.
Oh, sorry. So when it comes to work-life balance, how do you properly prioritize your personal life as well as your composition life?
That's an astute question, actually. it requires time. So you do have to prioritize and you have to manage things. I'm in a great situation now. The job I have now is not overwhelmingly keeping me busy. I can handle it, and I have plenty of time for writing. So it's not been that hard for me. It was a lot harder when I was in Tokyo for some reason. I think I was just busier, maybe doing more playing and practicing. So for me, it's just, I guess one thing I do is I get up ridiculously early now. I was a nocturnal person when I was your age. I mean, I was like Mr. Late Night, but now it's ridiculous. Maybe it's just getting older. I get up really early, like 5:30, and I live close to campus, and I just go to my office, and that's my composing time, and I have this nice chunk in the morning. So I guess in that sense, I'm making a special time for it. But right now, thankfully, I have plenty of time to compose, and so it isn't much of an issue for me. Although I do that ridiculous early morning thing, which I guess maybe that's the solution. I didn't even realize it was. But it is something you have to do. You know, you have to decide, this is important to me. I'm going to make time for this. Because if you don't, you have your regular gig perhaps. I have a teaching job, which takes a good chunk of time. If you don't make that conscious decision, it's true, it can fall by the wayside. And so I guess unconsciously or not, I've always made sure there was a nice chunk of time.
Thank you for the great questions.
yeah.
Really
Yes, thank
for
you.
preparing them, Dr. Lee. And now, without further ado, I'll come back and I'll take the
Thank you.
microphone. Yeah, let's hear Colors of Peace. Thank you.
Thank you all.
composer, maybe you guys want to have a photo with him, you guys welcome to stay here. But thank you so much for coming today.